It's Wednesday, March 27th, 2013. This is Arizona Mining Review. I'm your host, Allison, with the Arizona Geological Survey in Tucson for this episode of our monthly online video magazine. At the Arizona Mining Review, we explore and review the state of mining in Arizona, its challenges, its successes. We'll talk with experts from industry, from academia, from government, and we have some of them in the studio today to discuss some of the current state and future activities in mining going on around Arizona. We've got a packed show today. Ken Green from the Fraser Institute is going to be talking about Arizona's rankings as a mining state and compared to the rest of the world. Dan Johnson's here in the studio with us to talk about the in situ copper recovery project up in Florence. And Jon Spencer is going to show us some of the areas in Arizona that might be attractive for rare earth element exploration for our new technology-based economy. So as usual, we're joined now from Phoenix by Nyal Niemuth, the chief of our economic geology section, who's going to update us on some of the recent developments in Arizona. Nyal, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Lee.
We'll switch over to you here in a second. You're Skyping in from Phoenix, but I know there was a new report just released by Passport Potash about the preliminary economic analysis of the potash potential up in the Holbrook Basin. And I think you've had a chance to take a look at that report. What's your assessment?
Yeah, on March 13th, Passport released that report. And I've been looking at that, and I've got a few facts and figures maybe we could summarize and just toss out for folks. This is done by a German company, and the facts and figures are plus or minus about 35%. So this is just a preliminary assessment. They're estimating that the capital expenditure will be about 1.95 billion, that's with a B, dollars. That will cost about $780 per metric ton of annual capacity, and they're estimating an operating expenditure of about $114 per metric ton. They're looking at an 8-year payback. This is all predicated on using $430 per metric ton. The project is most sensitive to price change, but they have a fair amount of latitude there. They're estimating that they could still be profitable at a price of $285 per metric ton. They're looking at producing 2.5 million tons per year. The initial target area they're looking at would have a 26-year mine life on the measured reserve. Interestingly, they're going to need to produce 18.5 million tons of raw mine material a year by conventional room and pillar mining. So that's certainly going to be a difficult thing. So ramping up both the mine and the plant to produce that material is going to be quite a task. They anticipated that employment would be about 1,800 employees. If we want to look forward, where will they go from here? The consulting firm recommended that they do a phase 1 study where they look at the water, both the source of the water, the quality of the water, and they're also going to need to look at where they're going to dispose of the brine. They're going to need to have both a solid tailings pile as well as dispose of quite a bit of salt brine. They want to study the rock mechanics so they know the mining method will work well. They are going to investigate if flotation could be feasible. That would be a less intensive, less costly way to recover the potash. They also need to do some market studies. So they're looking at spending, or estimating, they recommend another $7.5 million expenditure to take on this phase 1, after which, if everything's good, everything's successful, then they could actually do a true feasibility study.
Nyal, the numbers you ran off there at the beginning, about $780 or so per ton for the capital costs, that's significantly lower than the numbers we're seeing for new greenfield projects, say in Saskatchewan, where about half of the world's potash comes from. So that would seem to suggest that even though it's a brand new mine starting up in Arizona, it would still be perhaps 30% cheaper per ton of production than new mines elsewhere in the world. So that was that factored into their economic analysis?
You know, I'm not real familiar with all the proposals around the planet, but certainly that was the way the president of the company categorize that figure.
Okay. I think there was also a surprise that it was 2.5 million tons and a $1.9 billion capital expenditure. I think people had been thinking much smaller. So, any thoughts about the size and scope of this? I know you mentioned 18 million tons a year of material moved to be able to produce that. So where are they going to store all of that?
Well, there's lots of work yet to be done, but yes, I was quite surprised at the initial size that was forecast in this study.
Yeah.
So that's still obviously not a certainty.
I think you've got a land map, don't you, that we're going to bring up here and take a look. Yeah, here it is. This was the land map that came out of Passport's report, and you see the bright green in the center of the map is the Petrified Forest National Park, the federal lands owned within the park, and then Passport's lands are those turquoise or bright blue to the west side, and then some scattered sections below. But I believe they also, in that report, included the lands from the Hopi tribe, those light reddish ones.
Yeah, the report actually reports both some measured, some indicated, and some inferred resources. And I figured that was a little too much facts and figures to release here.
Right.
So the figures I were talking about were just strictly the measured, but there's a large, significantly larger, 10 times larger measured and indicated resource at this time. And that includes, as you stated, the Hopi lands.
Right. Fantastic. All right. Nyal, thanks very much. We appreciate it. We'll look forward to having you back next month and learning what's still new and exciting around the state. So appreciate it.
Good. Thank you.
Well, let me... well, those of you in Tucson may have seen the front page story in the Arizona Daily Star on Sunday, Arizona's New Frontier in Rare Earth Search. And this was a big feature story about the potential for rare earth elements being discovered in Arizona. And they're used widely in manufacturing for all kinds of new technology, cell phones, clean energy tools, and in the aerospace industries. They've become a really important strategic and critical mineral. But the conventional wisdom is that we don't have rare earths in Arizona. So joining us now is Dr. Jon Spencer, the chief geologist here at AZGS, and he's going to give us some perspectives on that. Welcome back to the review, Jon.
Thank you.
So this renewed interest was really triggered a few months ago when Dr. Virginia McLemore from the New Mexico Bureau of Geology and Mineral Resources gave a talk here in Tucson at the local Geologic Society meeting. And she showed that in New Mexico, they've got a large number of rare earth deposits scattered around the state. And it was really surprising when you look at the map of New Mexico compared it to the map of Arizona, and we don't show any of those similar kinds of deposits. And a lot of us then, talking to Ginger afterwards, recognized that the same kinds of rock units that she described as holding rare earths in New Mexico exist. They occur here in Arizona, but we haven't discovered rare earths in them. So I think Ginger's given a list to us of the types of rocks that they found rare earths in. And can you tell us, do we have those kinds of rock types here in Arizona, and do we have that potential?
Yes, certainly. There are a lot of different kinds of rocks that rare earth elements are associated with. The most common association is with alkaline igneous rocks, and the most greatest number of alkaline igneous rocks that are associated with rare earth elements are actually in Mojave County. And I have a map here that shows the area in southern Mojave County that that has these deposits. First thing I want to point out is Mountain Pass here in California has the largest rare earth element deposit in the country. It's the only one that's produced rare earths commercially. It's going back in production. The two deposits in Mojave County, what's called the Kingman Feldspar mine and the rare metals mine, are both in pegmatites, which are basically alkaline igneous rocks that are probably, we think, about the same age as the Mountain Pass deposit, and they were produced under similar geologic conditions. And probably the most exciting thing about these deposits is they might be the tip of an iceberg, a much larger deposit at depth. The White Picacho pegmatite district down here north west of Phoenix is not known to have rare earth elements, not known to have rare earth minerals in the pegmatites. The pegmatite's a kind of vein, an igneous rock type of vein-like deposit. So this whole belt, what's called the pegmatite belt in Arizona from Kingman down toward Phoenix, has potential for more discoveries, even perhaps something like Mountain Pass, although that would be a stretch, but you never know. Now there's other types of deposits in the state. I point out the Clara Peak deposit. There's a fault, a large displacement, low angle normal fault, and the hydrothermal fluids that moved along the fault have deposited rare earth metals deposits that have, this has been drilled, it's been a site of interest, the grades haven't been high enough to warrant mining. But it's one of the new deposit types that perhaps are triggering more exploration interest in Arizona. If we look at a statewide map, there are a couple of places that are of interest here. Some exploration activity down south of Tombstone by a geologist here in town, Jim Briscoe and his company, have turned up more evidence of rare earth elements in the area that had been known for some time. A report at least as far back as 1953 has identified rare earth elements in this area, but modern analysis has turned up a broader, larger anomaly than we suspected previously. Also, another type of deposit up here in Black Mesa, in the northeastern part of Black Mesa, there are placer sands that contain monazite, which is a rare earth element mineral. And this is a type of deposit that Virginia McLemore pointed out. There's many of them in New Mexico. They're low grade, but they're potentially large tonnage. And then finally, we have a lot of alkaline igneous rocks in the state, scattered across the state, and all of these are potential targets for exploration activity that might turn up some rare earth element minerals in concentrations that had not previously been appreciated, in part because modern analytical techniques have given us a lot more ability to identify these deposits than we've had in the past.
Okay. John, it sounds like the big difference between New Mexico and Arizona is not so much our potential, but the fact that New Mexico's been carrying out very detailed assessments for the last 25 years, and we haven't done that same level of exploration.
That's right, and the accessibility of analytical techniques now to determine these low-grade anomalies, we just didn't have access to that, years and years ago, and now we do. And so this would be a good time to start a new program of evaluating the statewide resources with modern analytical techniques.
Okay. Well, I've also heard from at least 2 companies in Arizona now that are looking very hard at a couple of deposits that they found that they think could be economic. So if either one of those turn out to be a viable economic deposit, I could see that opening the floodgates and a lot more exploration going on. All right, John, thanks again for joining us, and we're going to be watching for more rare earth element activity around the state.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay. Well, joining us online today from Calgary in Canada is Dr. Kenneth Green, Senior Director for Energy and Natural Resources at the Fraser Institute. Thanks for joining us today, Ken.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Well, can you tell us what is the Fraser Institute and what do you do there?
Well, the Fraser Institute is a public policy think tank, which means we look at the effect that government policies have on markets and through markets on the well-being of people.
Okay. Well, now you're the director of an annual report that was just released by the Fraser Institute, titled Survey of Mining Companies 2012-2013. So
yes.
What is the survey? What's it about? How do you compile that?
Well, for Canada, the mining sector is an important part of our economic activity, both domestically and in terms of foreign investment. And the Fraser Institute, back in 1997, was reading about a lot of unhappiness in the mining sector regarding the regulatory regimes in Canada and around the world, for that matter. And we decided it would be interesting to see, again, as to our mission, how government interventions affect this economic activity known as mining. And so we looked at the possibilities, and because of the time lags, of course, between regulatory changes and actual investments and the lack of data on actual investments, it's private data, we couldn't get at this directly. But we realized we can get at this indirectly through a survey of the major mining company executives who guide capital investment. and we could ask them to assess how the government policies in the jurisdictions where they're active affect the economic activity of mining. We either encouraging investment or deterring investment. And the goal here is to provide a sort of report card that governments can use if they want to increase the benefits of mining in their country. They can look at which things are deterring investment, which things are attracting investment, and try to change their policies accordingly.
Okay, so Arizona was one of 96 jurisdictions you looked at worldwide. What
Yes.
was the overall assessment of Arizona?
Well, the overall assessment of Arizona is actually pretty good. The rankings, of course, the leading rankings in the United States were Nevada, Wyoming, and Utah, but Arizona did pretty well. I believe you're 30th up in the around 30 in the overall PPI, and your ranking, you jumped from 31st to 15th in mineral potential this year as well. So Arizona's doing pretty well. Their most areas went up. In the survey, 7 policy areas or factors improved since 2010, 8 decreased since 2010 as well. But you're doing pretty well.
Okay, now we've just put up on the screen a chart that we compiled here. We went through your report and pulled out most of the categories and then plotted where Arizona ranked in the new survey and compared it to where we were in the previous survey so we can see that. And you mentioned we jumped up from 31st to 15th in mineral potential. What causes that kind of big change, and do you have any idea what may have triggered this particular recognition?
Well, it's hard to say. We don't really know exactly what causes the changes. We can't capture that with our survey. One assumes that the change is due to either improved assessments of greater mineral potential or improved perceptions of the regulatory environment that will allow the minerals to be exploited. But the exact factors that causes, we can't get into. You'll understand, right? There are 96 jurisdictions with 15 factors.
Right.
It's if we tried to ask everybody, why did you change from last year or from 2 years ago, it would be somewhat impossible to figure out. So
okay. Well, as you mentioned, Arizona seems to fare pretty well in most categories. But when you look at the diagram, there's 2 where we really stand out as being near the bottom. And one of them is the uncertainty on lands protected and uncertainty on environmental regulations.
Yeah.
So as I read your report, in the write-up on Arizona, there was really only one quote that you included in there from one of the survey respondents who mentioned specifically the federal withdrawal of 1 million acres of public land from mineral entry up in northern Arizona. So was that selected because you saw that as kind of typical of the concerns that companies had raised in these 2 areas?
More or less. I mean, there were more quotes than that. Of course, we can't include all the quotes for all the jurisdictions because of space purposes. In general, the quotes, many of the quotes were not concrete enough to be worth including in the survey. But generally speaking, the reasons why it was selected as a least favorable jurisdiction, for instance. So there's one question on the survey that just asks, what is your favorite mining jurisdiction or least favorite? And Arizona, the reasons Arizona was downgraded would be unclear politics, the federal EPA involvement with Indian reservations and national forest areas, and the withdrawal of the 1 million acres of land. My guess is it's also the overall impression of the attitude toward the Obama administration with regard to mining. The Department of the Interior, under Secretary Salazar, was quite aggressive in locking up lands and opposing both mining of minerals, coal, and pretty much everything else on federal lands.
That's interesting because I've shared your report with a number of other colleagues around state government and pointing out to them these perceptions. And I know Governor Brewer and other cabinet secretaries are very concerned about making sure that our government regulations are transparent, clear, and if you get into it, you know what's going on. Some of the quotes you just mentioned, I don't remember seeing in the report. Are those available in some larger report, or?
No, our quotes, we as I said, since we get so many quotes, and some of them quite insulting, some of them personal, some of them would reveal who the actual person is just by nature of the knowledge they have, and so the quote database is not publicly available. All the rest of the data is, however, available through the Fraser Institute for reanalysis. If you wanted to get the raw data on the questions and rank them and weight them as you felt was most appropriate, that's available.
Oh, wonderful. That sounds great. Well, we may follow up with you then after the show and talk about that.
That'd be great.
One of the areas on the list there that we were surprised is geologic database, and as a geologic agency here, we were surprised to see our numbers go down because for the past year and a half we've been actively digitizing something like 900,000 pages of mining files, 10,000 maps, and putting them online for free downloading.
Right.
And we see that Utah, for instance, was highly ranked for their geologic database, and yet our ranking went down. And I think what you've said before, it's hard to discern what caused that, but you have any advice for us on how we could get people to recognize better what we have?
Well, I asked Alana Wilson, who is the primary data manager who executes actual survey, to look into this when you raised the question earlier. And what she points out is that actually the chart that you created, because you went back 2 years, you went back 2010 and 2011 and compared with 2012 to 2013, that actually the chart's a little misleading with regard to the mineral, with regard to that factor, with regard to the geologic database. She points out, I'm going to read here because she just gave this to me 10 minutes ago. In 2012 and 2013, this year, 48% of the respondents felt that the geologic database encouraged investment, which actually was a year-over-year improvement from last year when it was only 35%. It is down 3% from 2010, when 51% of the respondents felt the geologic database encouraged investment. So I think the large apparent drop in that factor is something of an artifact of having picked these 2 years. If you had just done last year to this year, you'd have said, yay, we're improving. So that's the good news, is that from last year to this year, you did improve.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Well, Ken, is there anything else you want to share with us? I think you've answered the key questions that I had right now.
Yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I think it's great that you guys are interested in our survey. This is one of the ways that we know that the survey actually is reflecting people's concerns, that it is getting into government discussions on improving policy. We hear this from the industry, that virtually everyone reads the report, and when they actually say, where am I pondering my investment budget for this year, that's the first thing they grab, is to figure out where they're going to invest based on the survey. And we know that governments and agencies, groups like your own, get the survey and immediately want to know where they are, what's going up, what's going down, how they can improve their performance. One of the things we're looking at doing right now is mining our mining data, and that is, we're looking at doing time series analyses of certain jurisdictions going back 5 years, and figuring out which of the actual factor changes are the most influential in changing their place in the rankings and their perceptions. So we're kind of looking forward to that, and hopefully sometime sooner or later we'll be able to do that, maybe even get a way to do that electronically, so that people can actually look at their trends lines over time. We cover in the survey itself, we go back several years for the major indices to show how the change has happened over the last 4 or 5 years. But digging into the data to really get, if one jurisdiction says, wow, we dropped 16 places, how did that happen? We'll be able to tell you. Basically, we would be able to do a report that says, here's what happened. So we're hoping to expand our ability to use our database that way with regard to jurisdictions, because, as I said, mining is a really huge activity. I believe that the combination of energy use and production and use in mining essentially are two pillars of our not only our economy but our actual civilization. It's what we do. Is we take energy and we use it to convert resources into all the things we use in our lives. And most people don't understand how important it is that government regulations be transparent and consistent and respectful of property rights, and respectful or competitive for tax regimes and mineral rights and things like that. And if those things aren't in place, you lose out on all the benefits of that economic activity of mining. And we think that's an important thing.
And we do too. And your report's got a lot of attention here in Arizona, both in government and industry. And we've actually shared it with a state house hearing that's going on right now up in Phoenix. The summary, they asked us to write that up for them. So if I wasn't here doing this show, I'd be up there explaining it to them. So
wow, I'm privileged that you'd give me your time instead of testifying. It's an honor. Thank you.
So we hope you'll join us next year with the next review comes out. And we'll see where we stand then.
Be glad to.
Great. Ken, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye. Okay. Well, in the studio now is Dan Johnson from Florence Copper, who's going to talk to us about the in situ Florence Copper Recovery Project up in the town of Florence. Dan, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Lee. Appreciate it.
Well, I know that you're planning on recovering copper from a deposit under the city of Florence, under the town of Florence. But you're going to use an in situ recovery process rather than a traditional mining. And I think for a lot of folks, we're just not familiar with that. And I hear a lot of common discussion of the project as a mining project rather than a recovery project. So can you explain a little bit about what this process is, how it works? And I understand we have a little short video clip that you guys have put together.
Okay.
So should we start with the clip first?
That'd be great.
the
I
best
think
way?
that would actually
Okay,
show a little bit more of the subsurface and what's going on there. So.
Okay, yeah, let's bring up that clip.
What is in situ copper recovery, or ISCR? Injection and recovery wells are drilled deep into the bedrock.
All right, we're having a little temporary glitch here. So it'll be just a second here. Jordan lost the video.
Actually, I can talk about it a little bit while he's getting the video up.
Yeah.
Yes, the Florence deposit's a very rare deposit. It's a very Mother Nature's been very kind to this deposit because of how fractured it is. The material is so shattered that it has 10 to 15 fractures per foot of core that we've drilled in over 70% of our formation itself, ore body. So.
All right.
So,
let's do that. Try it again.
What is in situ copper recovery, or ISCR? Injection and recovery wells are drilled deep into the bedrock where the oxide copper ore is. Wells are concrete encased and triple sealed, along with containment above ground to prohibit leaks and to protect water quality using proven technology. Low pH solution, similar in strength to household vinegar, is pumped under low pressure through the injection wells to dissolve the copper. Copper-rich solution is then pumped to surface through recovery wells for processing into pure copper cathode sheets using proven SXEW technology.
Okay. Well, I think you've already started to answer the question that I had as a geologist. And so when I looked at this and I'd heard about the project, I saw, you're pumping this down, but you're going into rock. Mm-hmm. So how are you moving this through? And you said it's fractured.
It's very fractured. Actually, this bedrock is acting as a porous media, and because of how fractured it is. Back in the tertiary days, they had a lot of faulting activity as well as intrusions coming up into the granite diorite intrusion, porphyry type of deposit there. And then you have some cross faulting as well. So this material is just extremely fractured. It's the most amenable in situ deposit, I believe, in the world. I'm a hydrologist and a geological engineer and been looking at this mining opportunities for over 24 years now, and that's what attracted me to this particular project.
Right. So it really is unique, it sounds like.
Very, very unique. Very low environmental footprint. We don't have any stockpiles. We don't have any tailing impoundments. It's basically a large gymnasium, an SXEW type of building. At the end of the day, the wells can be pulled up and abandoned, and residential or ballparks can be built right on top of it and have a second use at the end of the day.
So how far does the fluid move from the injection well over to a recovery well? How far are you expecting that?
That's a good question. BHP did some testing back in the late 90s, and so did Magma before that in the 80s. What optimized spacing of the wells were around 70 feet at that time. Okay. We believe with further testing, or just most recent testing, that we actually can space the wells a little bit further and still recover actually more copper than they even earmarked back in the 1998 time frame with BHP. Okay. So they're 70. These will be 70 to 100 feet apart. One pore volume per se will take approximately 30 to 40 days to from injection to reporting to the extraction well itself.
Now, with fractures, a lot of times they're oriented in a particular direction. So when an injection well, when you put the material down, does it spread out from that and move out? And you have a variety of recovery wells kind of in a circle around it? Or do you think the fluid will be moving in one particular direction?
No, it'll move radially around the injection itself due to its porous nature. We've done we've done over 40 pump tests all over the deposit itself to demonstrate the porous nature of this deposit. And so it's going to move as a radial type of migration out into the formation and into our extraction wells themselves.
Okay. Now, I understand you're getting ready to do some kind of a production test.
That's correct. We feel it's in our best interest to actually go to a phase 1 production test. It's a very small footprint. It's a 2-acre well field itself. It has 24 wells in it. We have perimeter wells on the outside to further enhance inward hydraulic gradient if needed, but the premise, which is a well-proven premise throughout industry, the recovery is that you have an injection well in the middle, you have 4 extraction wells on the radial extent of it, you inject in the middle, you recover on those 4 extraction wells, and then we have perimeter wells on the outside of that to further enhance hydraulic control in the area.
So explain what you mean by hydraulic control.
Hydraulic control is inward hydraulic control, a cone of depression. So it's a negative pressure towards a certain well. When you say you suck through a straw in a soda can, it actually has a little vortex that goes into the straw right there. Okay. And that's the same premise as injection in one well, extraction in other. So we're always sucking, I should say, or pumping, in our case with a copper extraction, pumping more than we inject. So we'll always pump 10% more than we inject, so we induce a hydraulic gradient into the extraction well itself. So you always will see this cone of inward gradient towards that extraction well.
Okay, so that keeps anything from moving off the property, but also makes sure that you're getting the maximum recovery out of your extraction well.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a very basic principle of hydraulic control, and they do it in potash recovery, salt recovery, uranium recovery, and more we see it in the programs we see it in is groundwater remediation programs all over the world.
Right.
So it's a very proven technique.
Okay. So when does that production test get underway?
We'll obtain the permits in the next few months. So once we do that, we'll do construction, say from July to third to early 4th quarter of this year. We'll be in production by early next year. And it's just a small pilot plant. We'll produce about 1 million pounds annually from this smaller production plant.
Just from 2 acres.
That's correct.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and why we're doing that is, we're want to demonstrate the safety and reliability of the in situ copper recovery process, as well demonstrate and enhance the technical considerations to key regulators, to key stakeholders, and then further optimize our engineering design to prove to the environmental community that this is a very safe and long-term process that it can go for years, and at the end of the day, closure will be just a point in the right direction to bring the property back into a second use and its original water quality environment itself.
Right. So once you're done mining, there's nothing at the surface other than the pump facilities, the wells. You could remove those, but otherwise you don't expect to see any differences.
No differences. You would never know the well field there, and more importantly, when we're actually doing advancing our copper recovery program, we'll actually be doing concurrent reclamation of the particular blocks that we extracted copper out. We'll be doing rinsing of those blocks and bring it back into baseline or background conditions. So actually the water quality will be more improved at the end of the day than it was naturally.
Fantastic. All right. Dan, thanks very much.
Well, thank
We're
you.
going to be monitoring and following your progress on this and seeing how it goes. So.
We're really excited, and we encourage people to come out and visit. We have bi-weekly tours. We're averaging 30 people right now at each tour, so I encourage people to come out and see what the process is all about, and we're really excited to get going here in the next
So
few
people
months.
just come to your website and you can sign up for the tour or find out when they're available?
Exactly right. Go to Curis Resources and you'll see how to sign up.
Okay.
Or Florence Copper, either one. So.
Okay, Florence Copper or Curis
Curis
Resources.
Resources.
Fantastic.
Well,
Great.
thank you for having me.
Thanks. Good. All right. Well, that pretty much wraps up this episode of Arizona Mining Review. Thanks for tuning in. If you missed part of the show or you want others to see some segment on here, we post this afterwards. We record it and we post it afterwards on the ACGS YouTube channel. And you can see this and previous episodes online. Just go to the ACGS website or just YouTube and search for Arizona Mining Review. So thanks to our production crew here at ACGS, producer Mike Conway, control panel Jordan Matty, Ron Palmer does our technology, and we've got a great design team of Arnie Bermudez, Stephanie Marr, and Rowena Davis. This show is produced by the Arizona Geological Survey. Thanks for tuning in and come back next month.